What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Year One Podcast, episode 14, where I'm joined by the insightful minds of Micah McNeil, Felipe Segura, and Zachary Crilly. And Micah, do you want to open us up with a question? I know you had one.
Hi everyone. My roommate and I were talking the other day, just like randomly. We were pretty high, and I asked him the question. We were talking about sort of US politics, and sort of what we see about, potential candidates and stuff like that. And I posed the question that, in my opinion, I feel like this is the most imperative and important election cycle that has happened in the 21st century and in our lifetimes. And he was like, "Oh, that's the same thing that they said in 2020." So I wanted to pose a question to the group on like, what do you guys think about the implications of this election as it relates to not only domestically, socially, like domestic issues related socially? What does that relate to business? We have AI as one of those buzzwords. What do some of these implications mean? And how does that apply when we have, relatively two candidates who are, at least to some degree, have some cognitive efficiencies? Uh, uh, um, what is that sort of, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I'd say there's definitely an economic impact that's definitely, I think, top of mind. And I'm right now thinking about the Houthis and what's happening in Yemen and blocking shipping lanes. I think that those implications of if you can choose a leader that can quickly sort that out, I think that's pretty paramount. I think shipping is climbing in costs globally. And I think that's a huge disruptor for economies around the world, and especially for Americans like ourselves. And I think on top of that, I think what's also interesting is to think about what are some of the trends that are not affected by this election, one of which is nationalism. Both Trump and Biden, or Republicans and Democrats, now seem very interested in bringing manufacturing back to the US because of the disruptions in the global supply chain. So I'm thinking of areas like Taiwan. It's almost this assured security guarantee from the US for Taiwan because they have all of our advanced semiconductors for our AI revolution that's happening at home. So I think that's a really interesting trend that's happening, whether each president wins or not. But definitely global shipping, when you're thinking about inflation over the long term or over the next year or two, is definitely top of mind for me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Micah, it's funny that people think like, oh, 2020 was the biggest election, or right now is the biggest election. And I feel like somebody that's seen a lot of elections would say the same thing. But I think that's due to the fact that America's position in the international economy is becoming questioned. And it's like, okay, if that is becoming more and more questioned, yeah, it's going to be the most important election, because who's going to get us out of this or like bring us to the top again? And it's very interesting to see, like, can Joe Biden do that? I mean, he's kind of proven for 4 years that he can't. And with Trump, I mean, that's just such a charged word for a lot of people. So it's going to be extremely interesting to see if he actually can like walk the walk as he can talk it. But I definitely think, Felipe, you brought up some good points about what's gonna happen abroad in terms of shipping and bringing back manufacturing. But honestly, I look at this from an entrepreneur's perspective, and it's like, what does that mean for people starting companies? And does that mean starting a brand, say it's a product focused brand, will that be a lot harder to compete on price for these people that really need to enter the space but can't do it because the cost is so high? So that's something that will be answered in the next couple of years too. But Zach, I don't know if you had anything to add. That's my thoughts.
Yes, I think that there are three main areas in terms of the implications for this particular election. The first one is spending. I mean, austerity and fiscal responsibility are just not sexy topics that sell in elections. At least they haven't been previously. I would be really interested to see if their candidates. It hasn't been talked about very much in this election cycle, at least at the presidential level. But I'd be really keen to see how that would be received. Just in terms of facts, 80% of the dollars in circulation were printed since 2020. 80%. Like this is not a sustainable thing. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a PhD in economics to see that that's the case. So there's a lot of implications there. Frankly, I mean, red team and blue team both spend money. Um, so there's an opportunity coming up for I think in the last spending bill they said, okay, if we don't come to an agreement, we'll auto just cut 1% of the budget. In government talk, that's like a huge win, and also a very significant number in terms of how much money that actually is. That's number one. Two, as Felipe mentioned, is geopolitics, and in particular, war. I mean, there's a lot of conflicts that have been going on and that are still going on and that are arising. Whoever is in charge and in command will have a level of responsibility towards war. And I mean, we've seen the implications. Look, just in the past couple of years, we saw what happened with the fallout of pulling out of Afghanistan and the terrible pain and human suffering that occurred there. And then the third is kind of more intangible, and that's the soft power, the level of institutional trust and the perception that the U.S. has. I mean, it's really imperative that we as a nation retain a level of respect, both internationally and frankly domestically as well. I mean, I don't think I I I haven't spoken to many people that are very excited about the proposition of having um, Biden and Trump as the two candidates again. And I mean, what system can sustain itself when the people aren't excited about the options that are available to them? And that's why I think it will be really interesting, just to kind of wrap it all up, to see what happened with the rise of a potential viable third party, and like what does it look like, what does a win look like for RFK Jr.? I mean, he's probably not going to be the next president unless something really crazy happens. But what is a win for him? Is it 1%, 2%, 5% of the general popular vote?
Yeah, like,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, yeah, I mean, so all those things to me are really important. It just to me seems like, do you think that this is what the election is going to be about? Like, I think things are going to be just so crazy. And just like you said, Gavin, like, I mean, and Zach, like, things have been exposed. Like, the global supply chain is fragile. Like, the world that we've lived in for the last, like, whatever, 50, 60 years is fragile. And you have a one nominee being like prosecuted in court. Like, I feel like this election, like, you can't even calculate what's going to happen. What is RFK going to be able to do? What happens if Trump gets indicted? Like, what does that do to his numbers? So yeah, that's like why I when I looked at it, I was like, at least this is the one thing I know, that no matter what candidate is running, this is going to be the common theme among them.
And what is that common theme?
I think it's just going to be a growth of nationalism. I think that that's the trend, and resupplying manufacturing industry. And I think that that's super interesting when we're talking about things like AI, right? That everyone has their eye on, but that's definitely a new area that the industry's going. Yeah.
I would actually you would hope that it would be nationalism, but I think there was actually a poll recently done on Gen Z, and it was I the question was how many of you were what percentage of you were proud to be Americans? And the number is actually surprising. It was I think it's like 62. We'll put it in the show notes. I think it's like 62% of Gen Zs are like, I'm not proud to be an American. So when Zach is talking about sort of internally, sort of these cultures and values we sort of have as a country, they're very waning, right? So we need something that instills back national pride. What usually is done that passes when we go and we talk about geopolitics. But where I think Zach is going, and I think where I agree when he talks about third party and sort of that soft power internally, is could this election lead to sort of a differentiating perspective that is shared throughout Americans? Is third parties going, you know, in the future, is that something that's viable? That's I guess like is RFK starting a precedent that we see going forward in the future? And the question still remains. We don't know, but I guess that's sort of my like just quick bit on sort of I guess from internal geopolitical and soft power sort of point of view.
62% of Gen Z.
I think I sized it a little bit. It's probably like I think it's like 48. there's
That
there's some
that's
error.
I'm
insane
surprised at
though.
how high that is.
That
This is
is
great.
I'm actually
it's
not that surprised. I mean, we talked on our past one of our past episodes about like sort of like people not liking the country that they live in or they think that there's a better alternative. I was actually talking to one of my good friends yesterday and she was like, "Yeah, I see why people." She was like, "I see why people don't want to, be like I'm American or something like that." And it's a lot of people that, initially I didn't, agree with her because I was like, "This is the best country in the world." There's things that you can do in the United States that you can't do other places, full stop. But where I had to understand her was like there's a lot of people that are burnt out from a social media aspect to a political aspect. We talked about institutional trust. That's one of our buzzwords that we've used in our episode, and that or people are losing faith in sort of the country that we have built. I think Zach talked about sort of we've spent 80% of our money reserves in the last 4 years. The average mortgage in 2019 was like 250,000. That same house today is 400,000. That is insane. That's 3 years that you have this massive jump. So you have people that are losing faith in the institutions, losing faith in things such as the American dream, as one of those buzzwords. And it's like, how do we restill that national pride? And hopefully it's not a hot war or something like that, but something needs to happen. And that recalibration needs to be heartfelt. It needs to be organic. And I think that's the one focus that this election cycle can steer the way for going forward in the future.
I on that note, Micah, I saw this ad for I think it was Coinbase. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's like, oh, the grandfather's generation got schooling, graduated, got a job, got a home. The mother's generation went to school, got a job, got a home. And then our generation went to school, got a job, got a second job, and then was still 100K in debt. And
Right.
it's just like, like when I saw that ad, I was like, holy shit, like that's real, and people feel that. And that's honestly
Mhm.
why I think this election is huge, because it's the turning point of, okay, is that American dream still here or not? Like, can we still kind of succeed and thrive just
But
if we get one job in our 1% of population?
yeah, I mean, I hear you, but even then, it's like, okay, then are it's voting 2 80-year-old men, you know? Like,
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
reality, right? That's a
that's the
reality.
options.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really, I mean, because it's just frustrating, right? And I,
Mhm.
you're seeing, I've been seeing a lot of content and press around kind of conflicts between the generations, and the baby boomers, complaining about the millennials and Gen Z, and the millennials and Gen Z complaining about the baby boomers. There's really interesting facts and statistics around the baby boomers in terms of the percentage of wealth that they control and how that's at a higher rate than it has been in the past. Like they're not passing down and giving up their financial resources and their power in the same way that previous generations have, which I find interesting. But it all just goes to show if people don't believe in their institutions, you have a real fundamental problem.
Right.
And if you again and again are giving people, if I hear another person talking about how they feel like the election is choosing the lesser of two evils, that's sad. we
Right.
we do live in a beautiful country that has beautiful values that are centered around individual freedom and prosperity, and it's really troubling to see that repeated again and again, people don't feel like they have an outlet to make a pathway towards a better future,
Mm-hmm.
and that's essential.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a point, Felipe, to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you guys are saying. Maybe I'm the pessimist here, but like at the end of the day, one of these guys is going to become president. Perhaps RFK Jr., slips in there. But I just think it's like super unpredictable. I do think the world is a bit on fire. And I agree, real estate as a means of like acquiring wealth and like putting all your assets in that basket probably isn't the best way to go now as a 25-year-old young adult or young professional starting out. So I think you have to look at the alternative methods. Yeah, I mean, I think we can sit here and say like, oh, like, well, if we just had this president to fix the real estate like thing, like, I don't know if that's gonna happen. Like, Congress is super gridlocked. Like, the only thing that both sides can do is just spend more money. Like, so yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but like, I
I,
guess
you know, I,
yeah.
I think it comes down to tax point. It's just like at this point, it's just the better of the two evils. I mean, or depending on how you look at that or someone else looks at that, but I think just from a general sense, because I like your realistic sense on like this is what it is. I think we all have that opinion on it. Sort of this is what it is. It just sucks that that happens to be the reality. Um, I guess you know I don't even know what to say. Like,
No, but like I mean, so like I'm in the DC area and like what it's like you can predict a bunch of things, right? And so you're like, okay, like, well, I know that the government's going to spend more money. So what do a lot of people do? They go, well, I'm going to be in defense contracting. Like, do you agree with war? No. Do you have like a passion for making drones? No. Like, it's just like, oh, but I know that the budget of the military is going up in value, and there's like a huge like or there's a great value prop in like accelerating your career
right,
and gaining wealth through that means. Like it's
right,
yeah, I mean it's crazy.
And to your point, Felipe, about like, okay, you mentioned alternatives. And then my question is, okay, what are the alternatives? We've been pointing out a lot of problems. We are the people responsible for creating solutions, right? Like
right,
this is our country and this is our world, and we have to make it better for our future children. And from my opinion, there's a couple solutions that come to mind. It's going to take a holistic view, right? There's not one silver bullet. But I think putting giving in it stems, it's all alternatives, right? And I think politically it's having an alternative to the duopoly that we've seen with like the Republicans and the Democrats, the red team and the blue team, having a complete stranglehold on American politics, which it wasn't always the case. There have been other political parties in the past. I think that on the personal side, it's finding alternatives to working for like a huge corporation that you don't really believe in, taking, a more entrepreneurial path. And then with the finance side, I think that this is a large reason. Gavin mentioned the Coinbase video. I know crypto. Um, that's a large reason why a lot of people have a lot of faith in crypto is because they see it as an alternative to the financial system. I think that it's alternatives as a big trend, and also localization, bringing down the level of power from huge, like almost hard to understand levels to closer to home, and those two trends will provide solutions to these problems that we're talking about.
Yeah, I just want to bring it back to like the generation gap that we're mentioning. And it's like, how can we blame the older generations that it's so much different? Like, of course there is. This is the fastest moving technological advancement of all time. Like the tools that are coming out, I can barely keep up with. How is 80-year-old business owner of 50 gas stations going to even come close to relating to us? And that, I mean, that just goes to say that it's like what Zach said, creating a business with these tools that only we can understand is a huge opportunity. Like there's still 1,700 millionaires a day being created in the US. So it's just tapping into one of these tools. Like that growth and potential is still there, but it's just looking a little different than other generations. So I don't know what what you can make of that, but I just want to say that the opportunities are still there.
Yeah, I mean, you guys bring up like a great point. Like there's this duopoly, and they have, the baby boomers are ruling everything. They have all the wealth. Like, I don't think that they're just like gonna give it up, like on a moment's notice. Like, yeah, probably a lot of us are going to inherit a lot of wealth if we're lucky enough from grandfathers or whatever when they pass away. Um, but so if that's the case and you're in your early 20s, I think, yeah, like you said, you have to go into the fields that are emerging, AI and whatnot, and like exploit it, because those are your only avenues, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's good to, because you're right, both of you are right, and also just like what good is generational frustration? I mean, we all know and love baby boomers. It's our parents, it's our grandparents,
Yeah.
and to just scream into this void of like, oh, we're upset at you guys. What that's not going to do anything. So it's like, okay, what do we do? And I think that it's uh, creating and supporting alternative paths. Because I think that what we all agree is that there's some things that are broken, and at the institutional level, there's some things that are broken that we would like to fix for ourselves and for future generations.
Yeah, I think you just can't have patience or say like, oh, but they'll fix it, and then like my career will like keep progressing, right? Like,
Yeah,
I just think that these things will probably change, but it's just going to be chaotic the way they change. Like, we're seeing it with universities now. A bunch of people are getting fired because of DEI or whatnot. But it's not like, oh, just then everyone got fired, and then the university just focused on education and didn't focus on like random social values, and then the price went down and it was all a-okay. Like, no, if you read the newspaper, it's just people writing opinion pieces saying, oh my god, this is the worst thing. It's because of like this billionaire, he's ruining everything. I mean, it's going to be like chaotic for sure. And so, I mean, you can look at the institutions, we have to like improve them, but I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. I think it's going to happen over time. And so in the meantime, you need to focus on what you can control, which is this technological revolution with AI, you know?
I have a question based off of that. And Felipe, you already somewhat answered it, but I saw Vivek on a interview recently talked about how he felt like there was an energy of a revolution in the air, and he said, "Oh, um, we are in 1775, like the equivalent of like the year before the American Revolution." Do you guys A, think that these changes will happen quickly or slowly? And personally, do you believe that it's better for things of this size and nature to happen quickly, or for it to be a slow build and gradual change over time?
Yeah, I think immediately when people hear revolution, they think French Revolution, people dying. I don't think it needs to be as dramatic as that, or nor that it will be. What I do think needs to happen is sort of a recalibration of things. And I don't know if you do that by slowly mending things. I think you actually do that by breaking the system and building something that's better. You know, capitalism's not a bad thing. What is bad is crony capitalism, right? So 2008, GFC, a lot of people lose their mortgages, subprime mortgages, whatever. A lot of bankers make a lot of money, but they privatize the gains, but socialize the losses, right? So our parents ended up having to pay a lot, and we have to pay that back. You have to break stuff like that. That's not for a society to stay proficient and efficient as America was or is. You can't have systems like that. So again, I started with, I don't know if you do that by mendling slowly or you do it really fast. But there needs to be some sort of recalibration in how we think about things, national pride, how our institutions work. And then maybe we'll get somewhere. But you have this vast differing values and beliefs that sort of need to be centered back to what made this country what it was.
I think it's going to happen like fast, and the reason why I think of that is I think of Argentina right now. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to what's happening there, but like on our first pod, we talked about it. We have our libertarian Malay, there just like breaking a tradition of kind of pro-socialist presidents over, I don't know, the last 70 years. I mean, they've had capitalist presidents, but they've always tried to do it like gradual privatizations or whatever. And Argentina, I think, is like the extreme of what people worry would happen in the United States or whatnot. And right now, there's protests every day. They're trying to like fight him kind of breaking up the crony capitalist government there. And it's
Mm-hmm.
brutal. And he's talking about like the economy being like tanking worse than it's ever tanked for the next 2 years. But like that's what a revolution is. I mean, yeah, it might not have to be bloody, but it's not like comfortable, you know? And so yeah, it's definitely, that's why I look at this as like this is just chaotic politics and everything. And
Yeah.
so you need to focus on what's like stable and like what you know is going to happen. And we know that like AI and certain things are just 10 times better than what exists already, and like it's going to happen, you know.
I mean, we'll wrap up soon, but my point on that is like what was required to happen for that president to take seat. Like it got so bad in Argentina. The inflation was what, 50% a month or 100% a month for a long time. And you look at US, like what would have to happen for a Vivek to win, for a RFK to win? Like something so bad would have to happen for that to culminate in a huge like taking down of the two-party system or banking being, like turned to crypto or whatever the case may be. But I do want to leave our listeners with a business idea, which is an aggregator for baby boomer businesses. And hopefully we all make enough money to invest in that, and that could be a huge passive income business strategy.
All right.
I like
Baby
that.
boomer gas.
Baby boomer gab, new name.
If there is a revolution coming, it would be advantageous for it to be sooner rather than later before we get too established, and then we have to build it.
Yeah. And also like just comparing us to Argentina is just too hard. Argentina's been defaulting on loans since our parents were babies.
Dude, in the 30s, they had a higher GDP per capita than the US did. They used to
Yeah,
be one of
no,
the
Really?
countries. Yeah.
no, yeah.
They
That was where
were
my grandparents moved
I
to
did not know
Argentina.
that.
Yeah, no, it's just a country that was like addicted to spending, and like no one could pull it back because everyone was afraid, like, oh, if you pulled it back, like that would be political suicide, and like that's exactly what happens today in the U.S. It's just like
Yeah, that's actually so true.
Sounds
Oh my
familiar.
God, that's actually so
crazy.
true.
Very
Yeah.
familiar.
That's actually so true. Let's leave it there, fellas.
All right.
Have a good weekend,
Cheers.
buddy.
Gents.